I don't think there's any nuance. You probably have seen some of my stuff, but I don't know how long you've been doing this, but it's been a couple. So you're at Oxford now? What time is it there? It's late, isn't it?
Well, I go to Cambridge University, but it's pretty late here. It's 1:23 in the morning. I have this huge Pepsi to keep me awake.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you made it. Thanks so much for coming.
I was quite surprised by the level of decorum that I witnessed here, because as far as I could see, based on Pearl's other interactions with young women, especially young university students, it's not usually how this goes.
Debate team there, or what's your background?
I started debating.
And this was kind of my bad. I asked her to debate, she agreed, and then said that she's conversational. What I thought was she's going to engage in a debate that potentially has a conversational style, as in isn't formalized or structured. What she actually wanted to do was have this bizarre interview scenario.
And I ended up as a reserve for the national English team. And from there, I've debated kind of mostly informally. I haven't taken debate too seriously. And then when I debated Charlie Kirk, I started taking it a little bit more seriously, because that kind of blew up and I didn't expect it to blow up to that extent.
Okay, cool. Are you going to start a channel now or no?
Trying to start a YouTube channel, but I mean, you'll know, your guy had to talk me through how to even start this stream. So it's going to be a slow process. I think I'm terrible with tech.
Oh, I am too, actually. So it's no big deal. So can you give me a little overview of like your worldview? So you're a feminist. You believe in marriage. You don't believe in marriage. Women are oppressed. Men are oppressed. Can you give me...
This question is so strange to me because I never understand the crux of this argument. What do you mean by believe? What do you mean by believe in marriage? Objectively, there are a few things to think about when it comes to marriage. When Pearl says to me, do you believe in marriage? I think the angle she's coming from is less so, do you ascribe to the fact that marriage grants certain benefits in society and therefore we should do it? And also, do you believe we should uphold this marriage contract between man and woman, where a woman is virginal and submissive and a man is dominant and some kind of breadwinner, like a breadwinner in some capacity? Do you believe that we should uphold this contract? And therefore, if I say no, then she can explain why the marriage contract has been broken by feminism or by liberalism. A significant faction of the Red Pill movement ascribe to this kind of understanding as well, which is that there is no benefit anymore in marriage for a man because women are not the benevolent gender. It's this very strange thing, like a horseshoe theory. And I don't usually believe in horseshoe theory. I think horseshoe theory is nonsensical. Where I do believe in some freak accidents are incidents such as these. We'll have Pearl at this end and she'll say men are actually the nurturing gender because women are so evil and have become so corrupted and are so easily corrupted by society or by their friends or by a lack of religion because of the fact that they're so easily swayed from this predetermined path. And it's now the job of men to control and subordinate women such that they don't endanger others and society by, for example, voting in liberal policies or sleeping around or freezing their eggs or condoning degeneracy, right? Whatever that means. And why I find this funny is because you have the other end of horseshoe theory. You have like the feminist idea, which is that I'm no bioessentialist. I don't believe that women are the more nurturing gender either. And so you have this like quasi-agreement between me and Pearl.
Spark notes, do you mind or no?
A spark notes. Yeah, sure. I think when you sent me a few of those claims, I was quite interested because to me they felt a little bit ambiguous. So for example, when you sent me the claim of asking me whether or not I believed in marriage, I was thinking, well, sure, I believe that marriage makes men happier, according to statistics. As we both kind of agree, the self-reported studies are a little bit flawed. But if we were to use self-reported studies, if we were to use that metric, marriage does make men happier. I also think that marriage as a contract between like a virgin and a rich guy is a little bit antiquated. In the same way that, for example, people getting married as a political alliance or out of obligation to people's family, I think those things are a little bit antiquated as well. I think that in terms of if we want to think about who's more oppressed, men or women, I think that it's potentially a slight distraction from other issues. For example, I think that poor people are all oppressed, and I would never want to minimize like men's issues when it comes to being poor. But I think that overall, there are certain facts about being a woman that make it more difficult for us existing in society, I would say. So I guess we can kind of delve deeper into it. I didn't necessarily prepare like this summary of my worldview, but I think overall,
that's all right. I mean, I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. This isn't like a gotcha type thing.
Yeah, she says this a lot.
I'm just trying to have a conversation.
Yeah,
so it kind of would help me to understand your worldview a little bit. When you come to conclusions about what you believe, do you go to studies first or what you see in the world?
This is about to become an occurring theme also. She says, well, I have more life experience than you because women are violent towards me when I go out on the street, and therefore I can understand on an interpersonal level, like intersubjectively, that women are violent. And obviously it's very difficult to reply to that by saying, maybe women are more violent in your experiences because you're a very provocative individual who incites violence against the female sex. I potentially could have gone down that route and said this, but then I believe that it would have turned into some kind of personal insults game. What I ended up saying and repeating throughout the debate, which was actually something that made it not as fruitful as I would have hoped, was that actually anecdotes are one way that you can measure and gain some kind of understanding of society and the world around us. But of course, studies and statistics are a collated group of anecdotes. So of course, an individual anecdote might help us conversationally, which is why Pearl positioned herself as a conversationalist here. But when we're thinking about having broad sweeping debates, when we're thinking about doing policy proposals, when we're thinking about engaging with politics, what ends up happening is we need studies, we need statistics, we need factual evidence-based data sets, because what are they? They're a collated, systematized collection of stories that we map onto a graph that makes sense, that we then use to do prescriptions. We should systematize a collection of anecdotal experiences so that we can then make prescriptions on society. Except what Pearl says is, A, you're young and have no life experience, and therefore I know better and I can make better prescriptions than you. And B, female teachers and female experts and female humanities majors and female social scientists are coming up with these studies. And insofar as they are female, we can't trust them. We can only trust our own personal experiences, except not personal experiences from feminists, because they're also lying, and women are kind of naturally liars. So what we should really only trust is the personal experiences from men and Pearl.
What comes first?
I mean, that's actually a really good question. I appreciate that question. I think that it's silly to rely solely on either metric. If I solely said, well, based on my personal experiences, I believe this thing, then I would have all kinds of incorrect beliefs, right? Because I have personal experiences that don't match up with what lots of other people's personal experiences might be. So I'm not going to solely rely on them, but at the same time, I'm not going to completely cast them aside. Because, for example, as a woman who's experienced being a woman, I'm not going to completely cast aside my anecdotal experiences there. At the same time, I also think that studies are really important, but it depends who's conducted the study. It depends on the methodology behind the study.
Yeah.
I'm a studies fan. I'm a bit of a nerd about that. I mean, part of my political science degree concerns like methodology surrounding studies. So,
Okay. So what comes first? If the study conflicts with your personal experience, what do you pick?
I think I'm always open to being wrong. I think that the most important thing is that you can falsify any claim. So
yeah, okay. Because me personally, I go with what I can see in the world first. I do like studies, but I think the longer you're in this industry, you see a lot of people funding them have agendas. Would you agree with that?
To some extent, yeah. I think, for example, you have think tanks. I mean, organizations like Turning Point USA that want to promote traditional values or disseminate certain conservative ideas across college campuses. When they come out with a study about how actually the evils of birth control, I might take a little pause and question it there, in the same way as if you have this super liberal institution that says something about how some people are like ultra perfect and ultra happy like all the time, and that feminism can do no wrong, and that all women are like saints. Obviously, I'm going to call that into question, but I think that's a little bit less likely, but I'm sure that you might disagree.
I should have hammered home the point, which is that it's much more likely for studies and statistics to be skewed in favour of a conservative agenda when propelled by large organisations such as think tanks. I believe that, of course, we should think about the methodology behind any study, and we should think about what kind of agenda the person that has created the study has purported to believe. But at the same time, there is no such thing as left-wing indoctrination camp universities consistently pumping out studies that are in favour of feminism and pro-birth control and are at the same time anti-scientific. I don't think that is an endemic issue, and I should have made that more clear.
So why don't we tackle marriage first, and we can kind of go back and forth about where we agree, where we disagree, and then cool. Okay, so you believe in marriage or you don't believe in marriage?
Can I just qualify that question and ask what you mean? I don't want to pull a Jordan Peterson, but like, what do you mean by believe?
What do you think is the purpose of marriage?
Good question. I think the purpose of marriage is some kind of partnership where both of you are a team, and in the process of becoming a team, you have certain legal protections enforced.
Okay, cool.
I just think it's common sense. I think this is the most lukewarm, dishwater answer to the question. And this is not to like denigrate my answer. I think it is the correct answer. What is the purpose of marriage? Well, ideally, the purpose of marriage in a healthy society is some kind of team effort, some kind of team collaboration so that people can build a relationship together and at the same time gain some kind of potentially even sacred or spiritual understanding of their relationship through the institution of marriage. I also think historically marriage has been super oppressive, and that hundreds of thousands of people who are children are married off, and those children are overwhelmingly young girls. So of course there is room to say marriage can be extremely oppressive depending on the cultural context and depending on the setting and the environment in which it takes place.
What do you think a woman gets out of marriage?
It kind of depends on all kinds of factors, right? Like, I believe that marriage is something that is like super intersubjective because it concerns relationships. Like, we can make broad sweeping statements about what it means for a woman to be married, what it means for a man to be married. I think women can get quite a lot from marriage. I think generally speaking though, men tend to get a bit more, and the evidence that I have for that is that married men, according to the CDC, they live about 8 to 17% longer than unmarried men, and also that women receive.
And you attribute that to marriage?
I think there are probably confounding factors like financial stability that comes from marriage. But it's also true that people who work together and have a relationship and get married.
Let's go with what you see in the real world. Like, you're in college, you see your friends who they go for, right? Who they're interested in maybe marrying someday, dating, or selecting for romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that they select guys that are in shape?
Okay, I thought this was absolutely hilarious. They decided to basically say that girls select for men who are not overweight, and that is the only reason why married men live longer than unmarried men. I did look into this claim, and what I found was that one of the factors is that wives act as health managers for husbands. And this is something that I found very interesting. Wives are much more likely to encourage their husbands to go to the doctor when they're sick, and unmarried men are less likely to be going to the doctor because they don't have a wife telling them to do it. It's also like just common sense that if we're going to take the perspective that people are going to choose healthy mates because of evolution, then this would have a symmetric effect upon women as well, but it doesn't. So why is this the case? We can think about how, sure, maybe married couples overall live longer, but why is it to such a degree when we think about men specifically? And the answer to that is that men have better quality of life when they are married. Men are more emotionally stable, financially stable. Men are more likely to seek out healthcare when needed. And also just that women don't just select based on health factors. People select for income, compatibility. They select based on their environment. And many unhealthy men marry. Many healthy men don't get married.
Like the in-shape guy is going to get more dates than the 300-pound guy.
Do you think a 300-pound woman is probably going to have the same experience on the dating market?
Right. I agree, but
yeah, probably.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, I did say this, and this just basically disproves the claim, but I'm unsure that I explained it to the extent that she would understand and therefore engage with it.
So, for me, I wouldn't really attribute men living longer to marriage. I think fit men are chosen. And I think a lot of times, like the conservative, and I'm actually going to go at the conservatives. I think a lot of times they're trying to sell marriage. And so they attribute everything good about a person to marriage. Would you agree? Disagree?
What do you mean by that?
So like they'll say that someone's happier because they're married, but happy people are selected for marriage. Who wants to marry a downer, right? They'll say people live longer because they're married. And I think it's because they're fit. People pick fit people. That makes more sense to me.
I mean, she's half correct once again. The whole people select for healthy mates is true, but symmetric. And also this secondary claim that she brings in, which is that conservatives often overemphasize the role of marriage in leading to positive outcomes. And I would once again, generally speaking, agree with this when it comes to prescriptive roles for women. I don't believe that the conservative overemphasis on submission during marriage leads to any tangible positive outcomes. Instead, it's more likely to lend itself to abuse. It's more likely to lend itself to bad mental health outcomes for women. It's bad for the economy, and I find it culturally dangerous. Oftentimes, conservatives are trying to save this kind of sinking ship of gender roles by saying, well, women have beautiful nurturing qualities. Women are incredibly compassionate. Women can do things that men can't do. Women are more empathetic. Women are more likely to take on a role of caretaker and homemaker because it comes naturally to them, whereas men will find that difficult. Men talk about macro topics, whereas women talk about micro topics. Obviously, all of these things are generalizations that aren't backed up by necessarily by data, and we need to think about how the brain develops, neuroplasticity. We need to think about all kinds of other factors. This is all obvious to me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can necessarily measure this in the way that you think, just because intuitively, when I think about this, when I think about the United States, correct me if I'm wrong, but the obesity rate is extremely high in the United States. Something like 1 in 3 people are obese. So I don't think, and that would imply to me that most obese people are not being chosen, but that would also mean that like 1/3 of obese people, 1/3 of people in the United States are like not getting married on the basis of the fact that they're fat.
Well, the thing is, women pull the fat plug after they get married.
You mean women like gain weight and then?
Oh hell yeah! I mean, women
and they like let themselves go.
On average, women gain 25 pounds in the first 5 years of marriage, which maybe
at
one point
get pregnant, and the average weight that you gain when you're pregnant is like 22 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, but I just reject that you have to. I mean, my grandma had
gotta gain weight when you're pregnant.
Well, you can lose it after.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
that's true.
So, I mean, my mom ran a marathon 6 months pregnant. She had like 10.
It also kind of depends on how your pregnancy goes, right? Like, I know people who've had emergency C-sections.
I'm just like, what do I even say to this? I don't even attempt to unpack the idea that, like, being fat is probably not the worst thing that you can be as a human being. Instead, I just say things like, there are loads of different colluding factors that lead women to be more likely to gain weight. For example, the way that they store fat, the fact that oftentimes women who are pregnant have had to have emergency C-sections or take a long time to recover from childbirth. Therefore, obviously, it's going to take a long time for them to lose weight after pregnancy. Another thing is, one of the ways that you can lose weight in a healthy and sustainable way is by being granted the freedoms with which to change your diet and your environment. And oftentimes, child rearing is an incredibly restrictive context through which you can potentially diet and lose weight. So obviously it's going to be a slow process that women deserve support for, not shaming or denigration. I don't think that's radical. I just don't.
Sections where they've been in this emergency situation where their child might pass away. So what's had to happen is they've been put under anesthetic, and that baby's been removed from them very quickly. There's not that much room for precision in the surgical process, that kind of thing. And the recovery process is much longer. So it would take like more like 3 years for that woman to lose weight after that kind of situation.
I understand.
To people.
I just don't like excuses.
I'm just not I don't really like excuse.
It's just I don't think there's any nuance. I think if you got to eat less, and that's it. And I used to be pretty overweight, so I can say that firsthand.
My point is that it takes longer for people to lose baby weight if they have a traumatic birth, and that's not an excuse. That's just a fact.
Well, it can, but I would still say that's an excuse.
Okay, why?
Because there's people that don't.
The strategy here was, if I get her to concede one thing, then I can get her to concede multiple other fair and reasonable perspectives about why people might retain weight after giving birth. There is obviously more room here when I'm speaking to a sane individual in regards to asking why it is so important and fundamental that women who have just given birth need to lose weight as quickly as possible, even if it's a detriment to their own health. But that's not who I was speaking to here. I was not speaking to a reasonable human being.
Don't, and just lose the weight and eat less.
Well, it's not an excuse if some people aren't necessarily doing that thing. I think that's not what qualifies an excuse. An excuse is like an unrelated reason as to why something happens. I think there's a direct correlation or a causal link between women taking longer to like gain weight, to lose weight, after having a traumatic birth. I think that's a causal link.
I would just say put the donut down. So
but are you like seeing that this sounds insane, or
really that you eat less and lose weight?
No, obviously to lose weight you eat less, but also you also have to move more, and it's really difficult to move more if you've had an emergency C-section and you're bedbound for like 6 to 7 months.
1,200 calories.
I just engaged with this as if this is legitimate, when it just isn't. No one normal is making this argument that women who have had emergency C-sections need to be bedbound eating 1,200 calories so that they can starve themselves quickly enough to make their husband attracted to them again. No one is having this argument. This is not a reasonable thing. This is not a thing that exists. And I feel like I went down this rabbit hole for no reason whatsoever.
I want to go back to, because we're just going to go back and forth.
Yeah,
you think it's okay for them to state that? I don't, so it's fine. All right. So what do women get out of marriage? Well, I don't. If you answered the question, I can't remember what you said. So forgive me if you did. If you can maybe make in a few sentences, what do they get out of it?
I think that both men and women get benefits from marriage, and there are not that many females.
We'll go into men's, but I just want, when I ask you a question about women, I want to stick to the women, and then we can do men.
By what metric are you asking me? In terms of benefits, do you mean legal protections, for example?
We could go legal protections.
Okay, sure.
Anything that they get out of marriage, it could be legal. It could be emotional, whatever comes to your head.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing that I'll qualify is I don't think that marriage is necessarily be all and end all in terms of having a happy and fruitful family. But I do think that women who get married, they do experience legal protections in society, and that those legal protections are probably a good thing when it concerns children. So, for example, let's say two people just cohabit, like a man and a woman are in a relationship and they have a child, but on paper, they're single. What that means is that a custody battle is going to be a lot more difficult for them because they don't have the legal channels through which to navigate that. And I think women are likely to suffer a little bit more in that regard, just insofar as, like, you might agree with me on a bioessentialist premise that women are more nurturing and have had more of an attachment to their child. So, I mean, you can even go with that as a reason.
Yeah, I think this was a really important reframing that I needed to do, right? Which is to say, women who get married do attain some legal protections, and those legal protections are good things. But later on, I believe that I delve deeper into the fact that these legal protections are not necessarily enforced in the way that they should be. So Pearl's belief system hinges on the fact that women gain all kinds of benefits in society, some of which come from the legal protections endowed upon her through the marriage institution of marriage. But of course this isn't true. Like, there is no family court bias, alimony crisis. This is a kind of made up thing that affects a small minority of individuals. When the justice system does get it wrong, it's usually getting it wrong in favour of a bias against women and in favour of a male. So what I meant when I said people attain legal protections is that people should attain legal protections and that those should be enforced, but they're not necessarily always enforced.
I really don't agree, but we could actually talk about it later, because I'll write down nurturing so I remember to go back.
So you don't think women are naturally more nurturing than men?
Oh, hell no. But we can go back to it later.
Super
so
interesting to me. That's super interesting to me.
But okay, well, let's start.
Yeah, to be clear, I also don't think women are naturally more nurturing than men. One amazing example of this is directly following the birth of a newborn child. If men versus women have skin-to-skin contact with that child, i.e. the woman who is a mother versus the male who is the father, each of them have skin-to-skin contact with the child, the oxytocin response is directly mirrored. Like, there is literally no difference between the oxytocin responses. And also it's the case that when men are primary caregivers, their responses are on a par with the mothers when it comes to hormonal, emotional, receptive responses. Basically, it's the idea of equal opportunity when it comes to nurturing and empathy. Empathy is also one of those cases where opportunity needs to be redistributed fairly between men and women, not necessarily among classes or races, but across genders. There is also social evidence of this. In my social anthropology studies, I looked extensively at different types of societies, different communities and cultures who engage in hunter-gatherer type structures, among other things. And there are many examples that I can personally cite during which men and women equally shoulder child-rearing responsibilities. Something else that's really interesting and makes conservatives very upset is that children who come from loving homes raised by two fathers have exactly the same positive outcomes as children who come from loving homes raised by heterosexual couples. If men were inherently less nurturing, obviously you'd expect to see some kind of drastic differential there, but there isn't one, because they aren't. But Pearl doesn't think this, okay? Pearl has this insane belief that women are out to get their own children.
I'm not like an ultra proponent of marriage. I just think it's like it's a bit of a value neutral thing, and I think overall men are going to benefit a little bit more from marriage than women.
Okay. So how do men benefit from marriage? Men
tend to live longer, and also something like I think there was this US survey, and like we say, self-reporting studies are flawed, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, more married men report being very happy with life compared to unmarried men. So they're more likely to probably experience happiness in a marriage. You can talk about correlation type of factors, but at the same time, I think we can both agree that being in a long-term stable relationship probably leads to the fact that you feel a little bit more happy about yourself, and you feel a little bit more happy about the fact that you're working in a team and that you're, you know, collaborating with someone to build something really nice and beautiful, which is a wonderful relationship you have together. So, I mean, we can start there.
Okay. So you think men live longer and are happier because of being attached to a woman, essentially?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily pin it on the fact that I wouldn't credit women for it. I would credit partnership for it. I don't think that I'm not that person who's going to say, oh, like it's all down to women when men are that happy. So I think there are loads more factors than just their relationships that make someone happy. I would never deny that. But what I would say is, in a partnership, in a loving partnership, in a long-term partnership that is happy and mutual and reciprocal, where you share burdens like on an egalitarian basis, then you're probably going to be happy. So maybe the question is it the case that marriage makes people happy, or is it the case that good marriage makes people happy? You know, I'm not one of those people who has particularly strong views about marriage.
That's fine. I would say that happiness is a skill. And I think it's your own problem to make yourself happy. And a lot of people go into a relationship and try to make it somebody else's problem. I think that happy people are selected for relationships. Have you ever met somebody that's super negative? Who wants to date them? Right?
I mean, I think it's also the case that like minds attract one another. So often you're probably not going to have someone who's super happy all the time date someone who's a downer, but you do have people date each other who are both downers and kind of both have this horrible life together.
So my opinion would be that marriage is a bad deal for men, because men are expected to give their emotional, their physical, their money to women, and they get nothing in return. When they do get married, they tend to get, I'm going to tell you my opinion, then you can go, okay? And then they get a woman who nags.
Yeah, she nags him to go to the doctor so he doesn't pass away from heart disease.
On average, she gains 25 pounds. She'll leave them half the time. So I would say, why should a man get married?
She was consistently trying to pin it on me to explain why a man should get married to me. She was trying to say, don't give me studies, don't give me facts, give me reasons why men should get married to women, i.e. explain yourself to the men in my audience as to why you are good enough for them. And I wasn't going to play that game. I wasn't going to do it because first of all, I don't want to marry any of the men in her audience.
And if you give me an answer, please, I would prefer it not be something like happiness or living longer that we can't really prove came from the marriage itself. Go ahead.
Sure. I think it's an interesting claim because there are so many factors that kind of go outside of this. Like, is it the issue that it's to do with getting married, or is it that men are in a relationship with women? Because what I'm hearing is you can probably ascribe all of the issues that you ascribe to being married to also just a man being in a long-term relationship with a woman. So is it the marriage that qualifies it as something that's a miserable deal for men, or is it a relationship with a woman? And insofar as it's just a relationship with a woman, are you advocating that men stop being in relationships with them?
Because that's essentially what these freaks argue, which is decenter women from your life to such an extent that you become a homosocial creature of the gym.
Okay, so I don't tell men what to do.